Hey folks, in this video we're going to be analyzing another game submitted via our Patreon page, and this game submitted by DeanG really follows the typical plot line that one often takes when playing against the Scandinavian. Here we see white getting a small advantage out of the opening, but black's position remains pretty solid. White starts to drift a little bit, and eventually black overtakes the initiative and actually wins the game. And so it'll be a good chance for us to talk about what to do against the Scandinavian and how white can fight for the initiative. So this game starts off e4, d5. This is a classical game with a time control of 2 hours per side with a 5-second delay. White takes on d5, queen takes d5, and knight to c3. Of course, I think this is the best and most ambitious move, just developing a piece, hitting the queen. And now, as you probably know, black has multiple options here. Queen a5 has long been considered the classic choice, and I think to this day is still going to be the most popular move in this position. Queen d6 is also very possible, but in this game we see a third choice with queen to d8, which has really picked up some popularity in the last couple of years. It is a kind of a simple option for black. The queen just drops back to d8, and from here the queen doesn't get in the way, doesn't run into any tactics with bishop d2 lining up against the queen. Black can just develop their pieces naturally and hope for a good position. And while I do believe white is definitely better here if they know what they're doing in this system, what happens to a lot of players is you develop your pieces to normal squares, black does the same, and eventually black's structure here is perfectly solid enough to withstand anything that white can throw at them. Which is why I think white really needs to be pretty active actually from the opening. Here after knight f3, knight f6, knight f3, black plays bishop f5. Dean plays the move bishop to c4, which I think is a perfectly reasonable move, but already here after e6, the game black goes knight d7, which I think is also okay. Black is already doing fine. So the move that white, I think, really needs to know to fight for an advantage right from the opening, this is actually an idea that shows up in multiple variations, so I think this is going to be useful against many different lines in the Scandi, is this idea with knight to e5. Now this move generally comes with a number of points. In this particular position with the bishop on f5, white is actually immediately threatening queen to f3. So for example, if black were to play knight d7 here, then queen f3 is already a killer. Hitting the bishop, hitting the pawn on b7. If black takes on e5, it's d takes e5 and two pieces are hanging. And black doesn't really have a great move here, as after queen takes b7, white is then going to be threatening bishop to b5 and knight c6 ideas, and black's whole queen side is collapsing. So this is already a big problem for black. And white's second idea, let's say black plays c6, covering against queen to f3, is to first play bishop to c4, forcing black to play e6, and then to hit black with g4. And this is the real point behind this move, knight to e5. We're going to see this g4 idea in different variations, actually. And after bishop g6, h4, white's plan is to push h5 and try to trap the bishop on g6. And it's very difficult for black to get out of this one, because if black tries h6 or h5, then we see the idea behind putting the knight on e5 is that we're just going to take on g6. So if h6, knight takes g6, this is just collapsing for black. Even without the bishop on c4, it's not even about this hanging pawn. If the bishop was back on f1, this structure is just terrible for black. So it's this g4 and h4 idea that's very difficult for black to deal with. Here black can play bishop to b4, trying to escape with bishop to e4. White just plays f3, covers the square, prepares h5 next, and again, black is in a very difficult situation here. I think white already has a big advantage. So this is just one line, but for example, if after knight e5, black goes e6, which is also a very logical move, then I think white should just go ahead and play g4 here right away. So here we can start to see kind of some logic to this, right? We don't want to play g4 when the bishop can still drop back to e6. That's why after c6, white does not want to play the immediate g4, but first throws in bishop c4, forces e6, and then hits black with g4. And after e6 here, g4, bishop g6, h4, once again, I think white just gets a really nice initiative. This idea is very dangerous, and especially if your opponent hasn't seen this one before, they're going to feel a lot of pain, because it's going to be really hard to stop this idea of h5, and then again, as soon as black moves that h-pawn, white just takes on g6, and this position is absolutely horrendous for black. The structure is just way too weak. So this is the move that is really quite strong against a lot of these Scandi lines. For example, let's say black plays bishop g4 in this position, which is a very popular choice. Here I think white should just go ahead and immediately target the bishop with h3. And at this point, black should probably take on f3 and give up the bishop pair. Then you get this kind of position, which is a completely different story. Here, white gets to do two bishops, but black's position is going to be very solid here, with black putting all of their pieces on the light squares. I actually did a couple of videos on this channel covering the so-called light square strategy and how I think white should fight against this one. But yeah, white is going to have to be willing to play this position. But of course, a lot of players, from black's point of view, just want to go bishop to h5 and keep the pin and force white to play g4, kind of weaken and extend their king side in order to break the pin. But I think white should just go ahead and do it, play g4, bishop g6, and again, knight to e5. And here white has ideas of pushing h4, h5, but also after something like knight d7 and queen to e2, white's setup here is extremely active and very, very strong. The bishop can come to g2. This bishop can come out to d2. White is castling queenside here. We get the queen out of the way. Now knight takes e5 can be met with de. And white just has a huge space advantage. h4, h5 is still coming. And I think white is just getting really just a crushing position here. So yeah, keep this in mind, knight f3 and a quick knight e5 followed by g4, because lots of Scandi players love to develop their bishop early with bishop f5, bishop g4. I think this is a very useful idea. In fact, even in the queen a5 lines, a line that I'm quite fond of after d4, let's say knight f6, knight f3, if black were to play bishop to g4 here, I would again recommend the immediate h3, bishop h5, g4, bishop g6, knight to e5. And once again, white has ideas of pushing h4. Here with the queen on a5, white is also intending to play knight to c4. So for example, after e6, I would suggest h4 from white, followed by trying to play h5. But after knight d7, challenging our knight on e5 right away, then knight c4 is very strong. And after queen a6, bishop f4, we can see the problem with black's queen on a6, lacking a lot of squares. Here, knight d6 is an immediate threat, just winning the queen. And if queen e6 check, knight e3, white's development is just fantastic. And black's setup here is really, really awkward with the bishop on f8. So these kinds of lines do exist all over the Scandi. After bishop f5, I think bishop c4 here is quite interesting, followed by knight e5, looking to force black into playing e6 and then following up with g4, h4. So take a look at these kinds of ideas. If there's interest, I've been meaning to make a full video on how to play against the Scandi and all the different variations. Maybe I'll do a deeper dive at some point. But yeah, for now, I think this is a very useful idea to know, as this knight e5 move can really, really cause a lot of problems for black early on in the game. Because in this game, Dean plays bishop to c4, knight d7, and now it's already too late to go for knight e5. Black could have also played e6 here, where after knight e5, knight bd7, white is not in time with queen to f3, as the bishop is defended, and black can just trade this one off, for example. So just like that, white makes one move that is very natural, but in my opinion loses a big chance to fight for the initiative. That said, I think white is still better here after knight b6, bishop b3, e6. Dean goes rook to e1. Once again, knight e5 was actually a nice move here, again with the follow-up of queen f3. Here the point is more of a tactical one. After bishop d6, queen to f3. White is not only threatening the b7 pawn, but is actually also threatening knight takes f7, followed by queen takes f5, winning material this way. So that means black doesn't have time for any c6, knight takes f7, queen f5. Very nice trick to know. Instead, black should probably just castle, give up the b7 pawn, and well, yeah, white is better. Black doesn't really have enough for the pawn here. So once again, this was possible. So yeah, I would really encourage you to look out for ideas like this one. Instead, as we see in the game, white goes rook e1, c6, bishop f4. Very natural developing moves, but this simply gives black time that they need to develop and just get a super solid position. Now the game is pretty interesting from here. After bishop d6, white goes queen to d2. I don't think white should really be interested in trading pieces here. I think white should be looking to avoid trades for the most part, but I would say the game remains relatively equal. Then for some reason, black decides to avoid the trade bishop to b4. I think black should be more than happy just trading minor pieces here and using the d5 square. Bishop b4, bishop g5 is played. Castles, knight h4. I definitely like this move going after the two bishops. And now I would say white actually has a little bit of an advantage here with the two bishops and a possible plan in the future of getting this pawn to c3, bringing the bishop back to c2, and maybe doing playing against black's kingside. Now bishop e7 is played, and here Dean plays a pretty surprising move, knight to b1. It kind of ends up working out for him, but yeah, definitely not a position where we want to be going for these backwards maneuvers. The idea of knight b1 is to play knight d2, knight f3, and bring the knight to e5, and granted the knight is going to be really strong on the e5 square. Problem is it just takes way too much time and the position is too open. Now black should have immediately just played c5 in response to this, trying to open the position, trading pawns off and opening lines, and then I think black is absolutely fine here, either after something like c3, c takes d4, and white is going to have to give themselves an isolated queen pawn, or dc5, queen takes d3, followed by bishop takes c5. Again, I think black's structure here is very much okay, and white's two bishops don't give them anything. So knight b1, definitely not the right choice. I think white just needs to develop natural here. Moves like rook a1, maybe h4, g3 somewhere. One day white can try to play for the h5 break and look to weaken black's light squares on the king side. It's a pretty slow game, but with the two bishops and no real weaknesses, a little bit of a space advantage, I do think white's chances here are not too bad. But in the game we see knight b1, now black goes knight d5, definitely not the best response. I think just c5, opening up the position was needed. After knight d5, takes, knight d2, white ends up getting quite a solid position here. The knight is able to reach f3. Queen g3 is played, c5, knight f3, knight h5, and now Dean starts getting into a little bit of trouble here, not really sensing the danger of the position, and not really looking too carefully for the opponent's ideas. So queen e5 is played, which looks like a nice move, hitting the c5 pawn, but of course just runs into knight d7, and black gets a tempo against the queen. Not a big deal, the queen drops back to e2, takes on d4, knight takes d4, knight c5, and now black is more or less equalizing. All the pieces are getting into the game, no real weaknesses. Knight on c5 is quite good. This knight can get back in with knight f6. Bishop c2 is played, rook d5, queen f3, rook e8, g3. Position is just about equal here, but white ends up going wrong. After rook e2, knight h7, rook e1, knight to g5. We kind of lose sight of the tactics here with this move, queen to g4, and the black is just a little bit more tactically alert and hits white with f5 and actually wins the game. As it turns out, white's queen here is just lacking squares. The knight has a lot of checks on f3 and h3, so queen f4 is knight h3 check and game over. And after queen h4, rook takes d4 is unfortunately game over for white here, as knight f3 is just way too strong of a threat. So kind of a surprising blunder, queen to g4. White needed to play queen g2 here or queen e3, and then things are okay. Probably this started with the move to g3, which maybe wasn't a necessary move, a little bit weakening, but at this point white's position was still okay, but unfortunately Dean just lacking a little bit of a sense of danger here as f5. Very natural forcing move from black's point of view, and all of a sudden it turns out white's queen just runs out of squares. Of course, knight takes f5, gf5, there's no ideas with the pin on the e-file, and yeah, black is just winning the material here and ends up winning the game pretty smoothly. So yeah, quite a tough one for Dean, but definitely a good game to review. And yeah, a good chance to discuss all these ideas with knight e5 in the Scandi that I think are very, very strong, but aren't really well known by players on the white side. I think a lot of players do what Dean did in this game, where they just make natural moves, but black structure is just very solid, and they end up kind of banging their heads against the Scandi wall. But look out for these early knight e5 ideas with g4, h4. I think it's a pretty dangerous approach, and one that can hopefully win you a lot of games. So let me know if that ends up happening. That's going to wrap it up for this video. Hopefully you found it instructive. If you did, please leave a like on the video and do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And with that, hopefully I'll be seeing you in future videos. Take care.